So I wanted to start by kind of asking about the context in which you use like mushrooms, because it seems like you use them for like microdosing and also involved with like plant medicine. So if you could, yeah, start with some context.
So, I mean, I would say that honestly, I use mushrooms and honestly, mushrooms and other psychedelics too, not just mushrooms, in just about every single way. So, like recreationally, I use them to like go out and have fun and like take them at a concert. I'll use them to microdose to help me, get along with my day and maybe be like a little bit more centered and a little bit more present. And then I'll also use them for like intentional, like macrodose journeys, which are to like really kind of just like dive deep within my own psyche and, maybe figure out maybe some blockages that have been there and just help me think a little bit differently. So for me, it's really an all of the above. I'm curious, have either of you guys experienced mushrooms?
Yeah, we've done a couple trips each. I haven't
Okay.
done microdosing yet. I kind of I might do it though soon. What's your experience like with microdosing? Like how many grams you kind of taking, and what's it like? Is it just mushrooms you do microdosing with?
I've tried a little bit of microdosing with LSD as well.
Yeah.
And for me, so like mushrooms, like my ideal dose is like 100 milligrams, which is zero point 0.1 gram. So like a very, very small amount of mushrooms. Some people do like a little bit more than that. I think I'm just a little bit more sensitive. And it's super subtle for me. Like it's just a very, very subtle reminder that like, hey, there's just something here that just kind of opens up my heart a little bit more and basically just gives me a little reminder like, hey, be here, be present, feel your emotions, feel what you're going through, and just go through it. And like reminds me not to get so caught up in my mind and so caught up in like my head and thinking about, okay, I got to do this next, got to do this next, got to do this next. It can kind of like pull me back and be like, everything's fine. It doesn't matter.
So it's kind of that clarity of mind and maybe like more creative thoughts.
Yeah. So like I honestly haven't done enough microdosing with LSD to really have an opinion on that. So I don't want to talk about my experience with that as much just because I'm not fully sure exactly what it is. But in my experience with macrodosing, so like taking like large doses, mushrooms help me go like within a lot more. Like it's a much more internal experience, whereas LSD is like a much more external experience for me. So like it helps me interact with like the outside world. So like I would think that LSD helps me a little bit more with like creativity, and like in social settings, whereas microdosing is with mushrooms, it's more of just like helping me go about my day.
And kind of on the visual side of it, I find the difference is LSD's more kind of patterns that you kind of
Hmm.
see within stuff, whereas mushrooms it's more kind of like swells. It's not like in the movies where stuff sort of pops out in you.
Yeah.
It takes your surroundings, your reality, and it kind of engraves some sort of swells. Like, yeah, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen like pretty crazy visual patterns on mushrooms. Like I've done pretty relatively like high doses before. Like I've done 5 grams, I've done 7 grams. So like on those doses, like all bets are off. Like you can see whatever the fuck. The mushrooms want to show you at that point. But no, I do agree. LSD is definitely like it's a different type of visual for me. Like it's definitely like you're right, a lot more patterns. Whereas the mushrooms seem like it's things are different, but it doesn't quite necessarily make sense like what it's doing or like how it's working.
I'm interested in like what were your initial experiences with these kind of substances, and how did you go from being like not having this as a part of your life to then bringing these substances as a part of your lifestyle and your philosophy for things? So what was those first few stages like?
So like it started for me back in college, and I'm honestly going to back up a little bit farther than that even. So like I grew up um we have something called the DARE program here in the United States, which is I think like the most failed public program like in American history, to basically try to keep kids off of drugs. So it's, you know, a whole campaign basically just saying like, say no to drugs, all drugs are bad. I didn't go through that program specifically. I went through like a derivative of it when I was in school. And so like I definitely believed it. Like I really thought all drugs were just bad. And like alcohol also too was not looked at as a drug. Alcohol was like its own thing. So when I grew up, drinking was relatively fine, like obviously as long as you're safe and not driving, but drugs, bad. So once I got to college, you know, I obviously drank a lot, and then I had a lot of friends that, you know, were more into like drugs and stuff. And it kind of like just opened my mind at that point, seeing people that I liked and knew and respected interacting with drugs. And I'm like, well, they're still fine and they're still getting A's and like they're still doing what they need to do. So like maybe drugs are not the problem. And that kind of opened my mind a little bit to at least like being willing to experiment with some drugs. And one of my buddies this would have been like my junior year of college. So I would have been probably about 20 at the time. Asked if I wanted to do some mushrooms with him. And I said, yeah, sure. And did that, had a good experience. Like it was nothing crazy and like super eye-opening by any means, but it wasn't negative either. It was more just like, that was interesting. And then it wasn't until about 6 months later that, actually I would have been 21 at the time already. So it wasn't until 6 months later, I tried LSD for the first time. And that was like the big mind-opening experience that was like, holy shit, like there's something going on here, something in this universe that is clearly exists that I don't normally have access to, that this now gives me access to. And so I got really into doing LSD in college. My senior year, I was doing it probably once every week or two, like 1, 2, 3 tabs at a time. And so it was all recreational. Like I knew nothing about the science behind it. I did no research into it. I just knew that like it was helping me think differently, think in a better way, in my opinion, and just be kind of like a better person. But it was like really, really slow. And so just a lot of recreational use. And that eventually led me to just wanting to use them like more intentionally, essentially just wanted to like do that research into like, okay, what's actually going on here. And then I found that like there is a whole field of research and like whole bodies of research that were done on psychedelics, you know, well, all the way back in the 50s. And that wasn't, you know, it was literally just the US government and political motivations that then made them illegal. And so that got me super interested in it. And I was at a point in my life, this was about 2 years out of college, where I wasn't super happy with where I was. Like I had a good job, I had good friends, like I lived on, like I was independent. I did everything I was supposed to do. And yet I didn't feel fulfilled and like I was actually doing what I wanted to do. So that led me to flying to Peru and actually doing ayahuasca. And so that was the experience that really fucking just, if LSD opened things up for me, like ayahuasca did that like times 50. It just showed me parts about myself that I never even knew existed, and helped me understand a lot of things and really sort of align myself with what I then wanted to do moving forward, which was working with psychedelics. Like I think that these are amazing compounds. Again, whether it's for recreational purpose or for like deep healing purposes, for curing mental illnesses like depression, anxiety, and PTSD, and helping people get clarity, helping people connect to God. Like they have all kinds of uses, and the fact that they're illegal in most Western civilizations is incredibly just fucked up to me. So what better thing to align my life with than helping other people like achieve the clarity that I've been able to achieve. And so I just wanted to be like a voice to normalize talking about it, because there's so many people that I know that psychedelics have impacted them in a very profound way, but they still don't like talking about it. And they're still like afraid to, because obviously it's still illegal. Like it's still a little bit taboo. It's becoming more normalized, but for the most part, people don't talk about psychedelics the way they talk about, oh, let's go to a bar and have a drink. Nobody openly is like, oh, hey, you want to trip on 3 grams of mushrooms on Saturday? Like it's, a little bit more under the table.
Yeah, yeah. Now, there's a lot to unpack there. I'm really interested by a lot of what you said. But I want to go back to sort of something you said close to the beginning, where you talked about internal experiences compared to external experiences on these substances. And I want to know, you can be as personal and open as you would like to be with this, but like, what were some of those internal experiences that you had? You used words like mind opening and things like this. And obviously the research looks at a feeling of love and connection and ego dissolution and things like that. So I'm interested in what those were for you, maybe at the beginning and as you've sort of progressed on your journey. And also, how has that changed your sober life, when you're not in these states? How has that adapted the way you approach life?
That's a good question. So I'll start at the beginning. Like at the beginning, before I had actually done any research and knew that these substances could be used to like purposely enact changes in my life. Just little, like I grew up pretty like irritable. I'd say just kind of angry and like pessimistic. And, my first experiences on LSD, there were just little thoughts that would cross my mind where, something would happen during the trip that normally would make me pretty angry. And I'd find myself just like laughing at it, and kind of just like the little light switch that went off, being like, well, maybe when I'm not tripping, like I don't have to get mad at this too. I can just laugh it off, and like there's no reason for me to take this shit personally, because it's not personally. It's things just happen. There's nothing I can do about it, and so helping me just calm down a little bit and become a little bit less reactive in that way, and then also opening me up to like feelings of love. I wouldn't say that love was something that I was open about expressing growing up. Like I didn't like to feel love. I didn't want to admit that like I needed love, just because of some things that happened in my childhood. My parents love me. Like, let me make that abundantly clear. Just their way of showing it and some of the things that happened, it didn't always feel that way. And so it was just very, very confusing for me. And so in my mind growing up, it was like, okay, well, if I just don't need love, if I just don't focus on that, then I don't have to deal with like all of this pain and all of this heartbreak and shit that's making me feel so bad inside. So that was my solution as a child. And like, the ego does things to keep you safe. That was my way of staying safe growing up. Well, once I started taking LSD, I feel just eternal love and everything around me feels great. And, it kind of opened my mind up like, okay, maybe love is not something that I can avoid. And so it helped change my relationship with it. And then I'll jump forward to ayahuasca, because that was the really big internal changes that happened. And
you recall what your trip like on ayahuasca? Sorry.
What?
Like, can you recall what the trip was like on ayahuasca?
I can recall every single second. So I did 3 ceremonies over the course of a week. So it was 3 different times that I took it. And I could tell you everything that happened on every single one of them, like to this day still. And that was 1.5 years ago. Like it's so ingrained in my mind, everything that happens. And you're very aware of what's going on as you're going through it. So like the first ceremony that I did, I like wasn't feeling much like for a while, like maybe like 1 or 2 hours went by and like really wasn't feeling shit. And then the facilitator came over and he's like, hey, just like chug some water, see if that like activates something in your stomach. And so I did that, and then I started feeling like really, really sick, like I was gonna puke. And so I had a little bucket next to me, because purging is like a big part of the process when you're doing ayahuasca. And so like I went to throw up, and like I just like couldn't, and I was just feeling like down and like heavy and kind of like defeated, and I just like leaned against the wall that was behind me on my mat. And then I just started laughing fucking hysterically, like the hardest I've ever laughed in my life, still to this day, probably the hardest I've ever laughed in my entire life. And I just could not stop. And everything to me was funny, like every little tiny thing that I could think of. And the more that I would try to stop laughing, the harder I would keep laughing. And there were 7 other people too that were like in the Maloka, which is what it's the sacred space is called, that you're ingesting ayahuasca, at least traditionally. Nobody else was fucking laughing. I was the only one doing it. And I felt bad because I was being so loud. And I remember the first thought that came into my mind was just the fact that, like, how absolutely hilarious is this, that like I just flew 5,000 miles to go drink this like weird psychedelic like concoction with a bunch of strangers that I don't know. Like, that's objectively fucking hilarious that I just went through all of these steps to get there. And I was just thinking, like, I was just going back through, like, you know, some things that had happened recently in my life that had, you know, like made me a little sad, that I maybe wasn't quite over. And I was able to just look at them in a different light and see, like, you know, this is just like the universe working. Like, I can't control shit. I can still love people. I can still love things regardless of the outcome of the situation. Like, love is a choice that I get to do, and it's not based on other people or based on the outcomes of what happens. It's, you know, I can love without being loved in return. And so that was, you know, a pretty big lesson for me. And I think something that definitely had come up before on previous mushroom journeys, but I think definitely ingrained into my mind a little bit more there. Now, the second ceremony, 2 days later, that one was very, very different. Like, the second I drank it, I started feeling like this big knot in my stomach. And it was like a bad stomach ache. And it felt immediately, I'm like, I need to like purge this out. Like, this is very painful. And I tried to go to the bathroom, because like sometimes you also like just have to shit a lot while you're on ayahuasca, and like that didn't work. I went back to my mat and I was like, okay, like maybe if I puke, it'll come out. And just nothing was happening. And like the knot and the pain was getting worse and worse. Like, it was physical pain, and it was just becoming so uncomfortable. And facilitator came back over an hour or two later, asked me how I was doing, told me to chug water. Tried that didn't work. He gave me just another tiny little sip, thinking that like, okay, maybe that would make me kind of purge it out. That didn't work. Gave me another whole dose after that. That didn't work. He told me to literally like shove a finger down my throat, like try to throw up. That's the first time, and still only time in my life that has not made me throw up, shoving a finger down my throat. And it was just getting so unbearable and uncomfortable. And it got to a point where it's probably about 4 hours after the ceremony started. I'm outside of the Maloka. One of the facilitators is there. I'm like leaning over the side of this railing, trying to puke. And he was just like, what do you think could be inside of you that doesn't want to come out this bad? Like, what are you holding in? I was like, I have no goddamn clue. Like, there's, you know, nothing in my monkey brain can figure that out. And so, you know, some other stuff happened. I still wasn't able to purge. And finally one of the facilitators then comes back to me and says, well, maybe instead of focusing on trying to purge this out of you, why don't you just sit with it and just figure out and like just get curious about it. Like, stop trying to make it go away. Stop trying to judge it as this bad thing. And I was like, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. So I went back to my mat, and rather than trying to like purge it out, I literally just focused all of my attention on just like feeling all of the pain and like feeling what it is inside of me. And then all of these past memories from my childhood started coming up of times where I'd felt shame or guilt or unloved, and just like, you know, generally memories that I judged as bad. And all of them were playing like a fucking Rolodex in my mind. And the more and more that I kept just remembering those and like remembering the pain and remembering all of that, like the easier and easier the pain in my stomach got. And it was just letting up a little bit more and more and more, until finally it was like I genuinely felt like I had to like purge. So I went to the bathroom. I just started like literally like violently shitting. And then at the same time, I started puking and just started sweating profusely. And like everything in my body was just coming out of me at that point. And I can genuinely say that was the greatest feeling maybe of my entire life. Because like it was connecting all of those all of that pain and like shame and guilt, it made me realize like I'm choosing to hold all of those emotions inside of me. And I'm the one who can choose to actually let those go at any moment. Like I don't need to hold those in. Those don't need to define me and my character and who I am. Like I can let those go and I can still love myself regardless. And like that moment was probably when I have felt what it genuinely feels like to love myself, like for the first time in my entire life. It was insane. There's a lot there.
That's crazy. And like, there's interest in the connection between kind of your emotional state and then your body pain. Like after you do that, you can't live normal life again. But that's interesting. Like what you said, how when you release every emotion, when it's out there, when all your pain is, when all your vulnerability you kind of accept and you put it out there, then you start to feel like good in yourself. And that's probably like why that was probably so profound. And I just can't, I don't know the science behind that. Like how can you have that body connection with like emotions?
It's very, very interesting. If you haven't read it, I'd highly recommend reading this book called The Body Keeps the Score. And that explains a lot about that mind-body connection and what happens. So like a lot of like people that have like chronic pain or something like back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, things like that, which tons of people in Western culture have, like that's all usually caused by emotional trauma. Like there's nothing in your body that's actually hurting. You're just feeling that pain there because we store that trauma, like that emotional pain within our body because we don't release it. And so that manifests itself as physical pain a lot of the time. And so that's why things like yoga, things like working out, breath work can all help to release some of that, like, you know, essentially like emotional energy that's stored in our body. Like a lot of people will say like emotion is just energy in motion. And so a lot of the times those emotions get stuck within us. And so they're not able to flow through us. And so when they get stuck, they build up. And that buildup is what causes us to feel tension and pain within our bodies. Yeah. So we need to find ways to release that emotion, release that energy.
That's a very interesting way of looking at emotions. Like that does make so much sense though, because when you like heartbreaks, they physically hurt. Stuff like
100%
love, you get like a warm feeling in your chest, and there's like it takes the energy from your brain and then thinks, I can't have this in my brain the whole time. It stores it in your body. Mm-hmm. And that could be like yeah, that makes sense with people who have depression as well, like that they just have like no energy kind of. Yeah, did you see like much visually on your first 2 ayahuasca trips?
My ayahuasca trips were not very visual at all. Some of the people there did have very visual experiences. Like they saw entities, they saw animals, they saw like past ancestors that they had conversations with. That didn't happen for me. And so like ayahuasca is so interesting because you could have, as with me, 8 different people that have never experienced ayahuasca before all take the exact same ayahuasca at the exact same time and have 8 completely different experiences. Like it is so dependent on your mindset, your intentions, you as an individual, how much previous work you've already done on yourself. So there's so many factors that go into how ayahuasca affects you. And I've still only experienced it, like I call that retreat just one experience. Like it was 3 times, but I've only done it really that one retreat. So I actually want to go back and do it again this year.
What was the third? Sorry, Joe.
Well, I was just going to ask. So I was going to ask about, had you had any experience with like this idea of mother ayahuasca that people talk about? But obviously, as you said, like if you didn't have much visual, then I'd say the answer is probably no. But has your experiences with these substances changed your relationship to the idea of a divine, or like you can use the term God in as broad of a context as you like. I'm not talking about any god of specific religion or anything like that. But has that changed your spiritual life and your philosophy towards what might be involved in our experience that is greater and more powerful than us?
Yeah, 100%. So like I'd say I consider myself pretty agnostic before going into that ayahuasca experience. Not fully atheist, but more of just like the sense of like, yeah, maybe there's like a God out there or something like that, but like I don't really know, and like I don't really care. Like it doesn't make a difference in my life. That experience showed me, well, so let me actually, I guess, talk about like the third ayahuasca trip, because at the end of that trip there was basically, I was just like sitting there on the mat, and it felt like I was just sort of like melting into like the earth. Like I was just so calm and at peace. And then it sort of felt like I started like floating out of my body almost. Like I was just laying there on the ground and literally almost floating on my body. And I remember right before I laid down at that time, like I looked at the time, and then that happened and I started like floating out of my body, and like literally, I mean, it felt like I just like dissolved into like the universe. Like I physically became one with the entire universe at that point. And then I came back to my body and checked my phone, and like 3 hours had passed. And I was like, what in the fuck just happened? It was just so confusing. And that experience just, I mean, basically showed me like there's so much more than I understand. And one, that's completely fine. And I don't need to understand it, but there is something there. Like I am part of something so much bigger. And like, that's what I consider God. Like God is the universe. We are all born from, like, everything here is a part of God, everything in existence. And so, to say that we are separate from each other is incorrect. Like we're all, if you trace it back to the original source, we are all made from the exact same thing. So we are all, I mean, just one collective consciousness, like experiencing different versions of ourselves over and over and over and over again. That's probably what my philosophy is at this point.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
I've heard it like framed as like taking the psychedelics as like drowning in complexity of the universe, and that's kind of what you described there. Joel, what was that thing you said about Mother Ayahuasca? I haven't heard that before.
Oh, it's just like it's kind of, I don't know, a symbol that people ascribe to the visual experience that they have. They say this, they see this character called Mother Ayahuasca that's like kind of like Mother Nature or the spirit of the plant or something like that. And I was just interested if Cameron had the same experience with it, because I've had a few people say that kind of thing.
So what I will say about that is like, I didn't visually see anything and like, be like, oh, that's Mother Ayahuasca. But like the feelings that I had while I was there, like I definitely felt the spirit of Mother Ayahuasca. Like I can 100% say that like I felt the spirit, didn't see it, but like it's a very felt sensation. And I mean, I'm curious about your guys' experience, but like the thing that I like about psychedelics in general and what they're able to do is they're able to get us out of our heads and into our bodies, like, and have us feel all of these emotions and feel like we're part of the universe, and like feel love, feel sadness, feel all of these different emotions. And it kind of takes us out of our heads. And so I now try to live my life trying to get into my body as much as possible, like back to doing meditation or doing breath work or working out, things like that. The reason why they're so good for us is because it gets us out of our head and it gets us into our bodies. So like I'm curious, what are your guys' kind of like opinions on sort of thinking versus feeling?
It makes you think a lot. Like in the spiritual world, there's no ego. Your ego just dissolves, your individuality dissolves, and you're just like the purest form of yourself. And I think that's probably the body bit. Yeah. What about you, Joel?
I think you move beyond thinking and feeling and move into a state of just being, like a wholeness, like a completeness, like everything comes together, and it's almost like all those separate worlds of ourselves then come back together. And that feeling is arguably what fulfillment is. It's like when your soul and your mind and your body are one, they have aligned, and you don't need anything more or anything less in that moment. Like you just are. You have become. You're being. Which is really nice, and to just sit there for a while, and that's it, and not have any attachment to worldly things, and no desire. Not even a desire for desire. You just didn't. It's just you are that moment. You become the moment.
It's that state of pure existence. Like you are existing, and that's it. There's nothing else that you are doing or being or accomplishing other than being in a state of pure existence.
Presence. Complete presence.
What do you think the world would be like if more people experienced that? And then also I want to link to your opinions on why you think these substances are banned, and if you've got any sort of theories about that beyond like the fact that it's just illegal, and like, do you think the world is calling out for people to just at least have an experience of what it means to just be and become the moment they're in, rather than being so caught up in the status games and the ego games that we all play?
So go back to the first part of the question. What was the first part? Sorry.
Do you think people would? How do you think the world would change if more people realized and had an experience where they just existed and they felt that pure being?
So I'm going to answer this with kind of a caveat. If people genuinely experience that, like actually experience pure being, pure existence, like being one with the universe, essentially just pure self-love and self-awareness, I think people would care a lot more about other people. It would become a lot easier to build genuine communities. Like we have connection, and like, and I say connection in just the sense that like you guys somehow found me and sent me an email, and now I'm here talking to you guys, and like that's crazy how that happened. But yet our genuine feelings of like community and closeness with the people around us, like in general in the world today, I feel like we're farther apart than like we've ever been. Like we're so much more isolated, even though we have the entire world at our fingertips. And so having that feeling of oneness and just being has made me realize like how important it is to have genuine community and like genuine friends and people around me that I can experience life with. Like we are very social creatures. So I think that people would genuinely want to figure out, okay, how do we create genuine communities again? Like small pockets where people can actually support each other and help each other, and not feel like it's me against the world. Because that's what it just genuinely feels like a lot of the time. But I will say, I don't think just giving everybody psychedelics is the answer to that right now, because there was a lot of work I had to do beforehand to get to that spot for ayahuasca to show me that lesson. Like if I had just done ayahuasca like without doing any sort of inner work whatsoever beforehand, I think it would have been a fucking terrible, terrible time. Mm-hmm. So like people call psychedelics non-specific amplifiers. So whatever your general state already is, like if you are a narcissist, for example, and then you take psychedelics, you're probably going to become more of a narcissist because it is a non-specific amplifier. So like, but if you're somebody who's trying to change, like I wanted to become a more self-loving person. I wanted to become clearer with my life. So that's what I got out of it. So that's why people need to have clear intentions before going into those journeys in order to actually get those things out of it.
Yeah, I think that's really nice. That non-specific amplifier thought, that sort of that phrase just encapsulates what I try and explain to people when I have these conversations, and I try and do it from more like sentences, but that succinctly puts into a few words. That's very nice. But why do you think, on a general point, so many people don't know what it's like to feel loved and aren't open to what that really means, because it's a common theme you hear a lot, and we all experience it in our lives with people we interact with, people who are very closed off and very, very guarded, and you can't really get through these filters and these walls that they put to themselves and their heart. So do you think we need to be taught how to love? Do we think we need to be just exposed to more love? And why do you think this problem is a thing?
That's a really good question. And I think it more boils down to the fact it's not that people don't want to feel loved, it's that people don't want to feel pain. The opposite of love is pain. And so when you open yourself up fully to love, you are also opening yourself up more fully to feeling that intense pain of heartbreak. And so that's the feeling that people are running from, but you can't have one without the other. Like I can look back on my life now and see that it wasn't that I was running away from love. It was because like I just wanted to stop getting hurt so much, because it felt like every time I opened myself up to love a little bit more, something would happen, and then I would feel that pain and that heartbreak. And we label that pain and heartbreak as a bad experience. Objectively, it doesn't feel great to feel pain and to feel heartbreak. But like if you really open yourself up to feeling the pain and the heartbreak fully, you'll see that it does transmute itself into love at the end of that. But you have to go through that experience of fully feeling the pain and fully feeling the heartbreak and fully going through the shit that you need to go through in order for that to get transmuted into love. So like that's what I think the real thing is we label feelings and emotions as good or bad. There's no such thing as a good or a bad feeling. That's all judgments that we give them. So if we can look at it that way and see all feelings and all emotions as just a thing that we all need to feel, it opens you up a lot more to feeling love and feeling the good ones even more so than we do now, but it also opens you up to feeling the quote unquote bad ones too, like the anger, the jealousy, the rage, the pain, the heartbreak, the sadness, the depression, the anxiety. Like those are all there for a reason. So we're not supposed to, not feel them. Like people that are anxious and like, being like, I want to get rid of my anxiety. Like my relationship with anxiety has changed a lot. I now can notice like, oh shit, I'm feeling really anxious. Well, why am I feeling anxious? Like, what is the reason behind that? Like that anxiety is there for a reason, to teach you something, to be like, well, maybe this is a situation that you shouldn't be in. Like maybe these are friends that you shouldn't be around if they make you anxious all the time. So like those emotions are there to teach you a lesson just as much as the joy and the happiness and the love is there to teach you as well. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, it's nice. I like the concept that you can change your relationship to an emotion or a feeling. It's almost like that's the purpose of our consciousness. It's like animals and more primal, less sort of, I don't know, less human creatures. They just feel things, they're just driven by these drives.
They feel and then they act, and then it's done, and then they're done with it. They don't then dwell on the fact that they just got angry. They're like, okay, cool. I'm fine now. We're I mean, as far as we know, we're one of the only animals that can then dwell on the fact that we just had an emotion and then think about the experience that we just had.
Yeah.
The way that most other animals do it, they just go through it.
For sure. It's like there's this intermediary stage of cognition that is specific to a human being where, and maybe that's what the function of consciousness is, to notice that, right? But if you're not educated, you're right, you can bring things from the past. I mean, I like the idea that there's no such thing as a bad day. Like you can create a bad day from a bad minute that becomes a bad hour, that becomes a bad day, or a bad hour that just becomes a bad day. Whereas realistically, you might have a bad experience, but that doesn't have to then expand out across time. We can, and if we're not aware of that intermediary stage we have, it can hurt us in a way. But then if you can bring it into your power and, as you say, change your relationship to emotions, actually then you can take a bad feeling and transduce it in a way, like an alchemist, turning lead into gold and create something actually that you can grow from and then share. So yeah, really nice.
Yeah, that's really important. One of my big lessons is like the smell through the pain. It's like you just have to re recapsulate your states in your mind, and then you can find a positive in it. Um, but this like you're at this like good self-love state where like you're like kind of full of love right now. Is this kind of an unlimited game that you think you're gonna just keep searching for more and more, or is it kind of maintaining for you?
So it's a big game of maintaining, I would say. Like I've experienced the oneness. I've experienced it all. Like I've been one with the universe, which is what we already are. There's nothing more than that. Like that's it. And so now walking around in my sober life, it's how do I take that experience and, you know, essentially work that into what I do on an everyday basis? Like, how do I go back to remembering that right there? And so in psychedelics, this is called integration. You have the peak experience, but now you have to integrate the experience back into your everyday life so it actually means something. A lot of people don't do that integration piece. That's why so many people can go take mushrooms or go take LSD or go take any psychedelic and then be the exact same fucking person that they were the day beforehand, because they're not actually sitting with the lessons and sitting with anything that happened to them on that journey and figuring out how to apply that into their everyday life. They're just having the experience and forgetting about it and going about their day. So like psychedelics induce neuroplasticity, which makes it easier for your brain to connect to new neurons and basically different ways of thinking, different patterns of behavior. You then have to do work in order to actually chisel those patterns of behavior into your brain so they actually stay. But if you don't do that work in order to maintain those patterns, you're just going to go right back to your old ways of thinking because that's what's already ingrained inside of your brain.
I mean, for me, like the danger of psychedelics is I feel like normal life doesn't seem as fun. Like, how do you sort of deal with that?
Yeah, it's I'd say at the beginning it got that, like I went down that rabbit hole, and it was kind of a pessimistic view of it, is like, damn, I'm so high when I'm here and then I have to like go back to my everyday life. That really sucks. But I think now it's to the point realizing that like when I do have that psychedelic experience, like that to me, like that's what life actually is. We just don't get to experience that on an everyday basis, because like when you're in that intense state of presence, like, man, it's fucking hard to exist in that. Like, I don't want to be so insanely hyper aware of every single thing going on around me my entire life. Like, that is too much to deal with. So that's why we have to come down and we have to be living here at the baseline, because there's just too much going on otherwise. But it's life is fun. Like, it's all just meant to be this. Like, there's nothing we have to do, nothing we have to accomplish, like in order to feel whole and in order to feel that intense self-love, in order to feel like we matter. Like, we've already accomplished everything we need to do just by existing. And so if I can go back to remembering that at any point in my life, like, there's nothing more that I truly need. Like, that is pure bliss. Like, when people say that they want to be happy, I think what they really mean is they just want to be at peace. They want to be calm. And so like that to me is living at that state of peace, of realizing that life is constantly in flux and going up and down, and there's chaotic energy going around. But if you can just maintain like that groundedness and just live in the center of it and realize that you're going to go through all of the ups and downs and that's just part of it, like you can, I find genuine beauty in that. Like, life would be boring if it was just up here all the time, because then there's no change. Like, we're supposed to change. Change is the only constant in the entire universe. So we're supposed to change, and we're not supposed to control how we change. We just are supposed to change. And if we're okay with that sense of change and just riding that wave and seeing where it takes us, you can always kind of be at that state of peace in the middle.
I mean, if you had the experience all the time, it would kind of lose its value anyway.
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting, like, there's no right way to live. I think I think it's really about personal truth, and a good way of finding that is probably psychedelics. And yeah, kind of, it's also about being in control, because we're kind of taught outside in normal world, like, these are the processes that you have to go through. But it's kind of like self-exploration as well.
I think a lot of pain and a lot of sadness is caused by the fact that we can't control things, and like, people want to try to control as much as possible, because like, control is safety, like, control is comfort. And then when things happen that are outside of your control, like, a lot of people just can't handle that, because they're trying to control the fucking universe, trying to control everyone and everything around them. And like, if you're doing that, you're living in like a constant state of like anxiety and panic because at the end of the day, you cannot control shit. Like, you're just giving yourself the illusion of control, but you never actually have true control over anything. I can control how I react to things. That's the only thing that I can control in life. I can't even react how I feel, but I can choose how I react, and that's it.
Yeah, that's really nice. I think we need to ban the word should. I feel like the word should causes so much damage to people's lives, man. Like, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, I should be here by the time I get to this age, or my day should have gone like this, or this person should have acted that way, or I should have acted this way. It's just dangerous on a lot of levels. Like, and on a kind of larger scale level, I feel like when you're born, you don't know what's going on here, and so many shoulds are just imprinted onto your soul and onto your mind just through being a human, right? And that's not me criticizing organized society, because society is brilliant. It gives me food and shelter and cruise control in my car and all those things that I love, right? but it does imprint shoulds, and I feel like something that these substances do, and when you go into those states and you see a different side to life, is it shatters a lot of the shoulds. Like, it shatters the narratives, and it's like almost like a clean page. You start from day one. It's like, okay, what's my story now? Like, I've got to be a functioning individual. I can't go around doing stupid things, and I can't just sit around all day thinking. I have to be able to go out in the world and participate in this economy and in this world. But where am I going to notice and change those shoulds? And how am I going to create my own narrative in whatever this experience is? That's always in this present moment. You know what I mean? So I think, yeah, that's...
Well, I mean, what's interesting about you saying that is, like, I totally agree with you. Like, I think the word should causes a lot of harm, and it's all subconscious too. Like, you don't realize that it's causing this harm, but, you know, even the sense that, like, okay, like, well, you know, if I need to be a functioning member of society and be doing something, like, no, you don't. Like, you don't even have to do that. You can go fuck off to another country right now and go find a commune of a small group of people and just live off of a small plot of land for the rest of your life. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. But it's the fact that you were born where you were born, to the parents that you were born to the society that you were born into, that has so many layers of conditioning on top of you that makes that seem like such a far-fetched idea. But in reality, the people that are born in that environment, like a lot of the indigenous cultures today, they think the way we live is fucking insane. Like, why the fuck would they want to go to this society that's completely paved over? There's no nature anywhere. They have to work in order to get some sort of compensation for that in order to then pay for basic necessities when they can just make it all themselves. So, like, it's just one flip side of the coin, and you just have to realize what side of it that you're on.
Yeah, I guess it's like a fish doesn't know about the ocean. So it's like, you don't know about the shoulds that have been imprinted on you since you were a baby, you know?
Yeah.
And becoming transparent to that is tough. And they are there, 100%. And even me now saying I'm aware of the shoulds in the world, I don't know about my inner shoulds that I'm not aware of. Like you say, the unconscious ones, the ones that make me sit on my desk on 4 p.m. on a Tuesday and record a podcast, or the things that make me get up in the morning and work or go to the gym, like all of these things. Like, who am I being ventriloquized by? I'm not quite sure, but asking those questions are interesting, I guess.
Would you replace the word should for?
I think could. It's always could, isn't it? Could's a potential, man.
Yeah,
You could do that.
it is.
You could.
Yeah, like, yeah, I could do that, or I could do this, and then it's more of like, and then going further, just replacing it like into what am I doing in the present moment? Like, this is what I am doing. Like, if we all truly tried to live like more presently and genuinely took things like one day at a time, like, our lives would be so much easier. But it's human nature to think about the future and plan ahead, and obviously want a sense of safety. Like, it sucks to not have that sense of safety and like not know that, like, oh shit, am I going to be able to pay rent this month? Like, am I going to be homeless next month? Like, that would suck. So, like, you know, we have to plan for the future in some way. But, you know, if you can find a way to also live much more in the present and just take things day by day, take your emotions as they come and let them go, you know, just as quickly, you know, I think we'd live much more peaceful lives.
Because like we're free then. Yeah, they're just like tribesmen. Were they like pretty happy in Peru? Were they without everything?
I mean, the shamans that were there that like took me through the ceremony, they come from like a fucking poor village, and they do not have much. Like, it's very apparent. And those were some of the happiest people I have ever met in my entire life. Like, just the energy that they gave off, they were so present, and like they didn't give a fuck about anything. I asked one of the, so like they didn't speak any English. I asked one of the facilitators that was there that like speaks English and like can talk to them. I was like, how old is Raul, who was one of the shamans? And this guy Drew, he said to me, he said he doesn't know. Like, he doesn't give a fuck like about his own age even. like he asked him, he's like somewhere in his 60s, but like he doesn't know. Like, he doesn't care. I was like, how blissful that must be to like not even give a fuck about your own age. Like, that's awesome to me.
Yeah, even age puts restrictions on you. Joe, we got to interview like a shaman or something.
We got to find one, mate. We got to go to them. Yeah, for sure. Well, my last question is, do you have any practices that you do regularly, whether that's actions, habits, or just thoughts that you come back to that try and ground you in this present, grounding you in the forever that is this moment now?
Meditation is probably like the biggest one.
Mm-hmm.
I try to do that every day. Before I start doing anything, it's just like, and like during that meditation, like all meditation is, and like this is where I struggle with meditation before my ayahuasca retreat, was like, I thought that like meditation was something that I had to do. Like, I had to go meditate and like do that. But like, all meditation is just a state of being. It's being able to just sit there in that state of being and just become awareness. Like, I am aware of my thoughts. I am aware of my body. I'm aware of the sounds going on around me. I'm aware of gravity pulling me down to the ground. And so being in that state of being like helps me remember, like, oh, I don't need to do anything. Like, I've already done everything I need to do right now in this moment, like, in order to feel whole, in order to feel love. And like, I mean, sometimes I will be transported like back to some of my psychedelic trips before, like while I'm meditating. And I mean, I'll start crying, like I'll start laughing, like I'll start feeling emotions and just letting that happen. So that's a big one. I'm not perfect at it. I don't want to make it seem like I do that every single fucking day. Because sometimes I get really busy and I just need to be on go mode. But I try to meditate every day. I try to journal every single day too, and like write down my thoughts, things that thinking in my mind, just to like organize myself. Working out's a big one. And like, I have a different relationship with, like, sometimes I go through periods where like I'm not working out at all. And now I just started getting back into a routine where I'm going to the gym 4 to 5 times a week. And I can say over the last month since I started that, I feel so much better, like emotionally, physically, everything about it. Like we are supposed to move our bodies. We're supposed to feel strong and like have our heart pump in order to just like maintain ourselves. So those are just some basic practices that I would say have helped me a lot.
And so for meditation, instead of like following a routine and with stuff to focus on, it's more like you go meditate and you kind of let the experience do its thing. You kind of see all these thoughts, acknowledge they're there, maybe look into them, but there's no like, it's not like a meditation app sort of fixed. Like
no, not anymore. Like I used to do more guided meditations, and sometimes I still will. Like if I feel my mind is racing a lot, I'll definitely throw on like a guided meditation to be like, okay, tell me what to do right now. But I'd say a lot of the time I'll just throw on some like peaceful music, set a timer for like 10 to 20 minutes and just sit there. And then once, notice what's happening. And like sometimes I'll get caught on a thought and I'll think about that one thing for 10 minutes. And then I'll be like, well, that wasn't what I was supposed to do. Like I was supposed to just let that go. But then afterwards, it's the awareness of realizing like, oh, damn, I'm really focusing on my thoughts right now. And so that even still helps me then just come back to that sense of awareness. Like, okay, I'm not in my body. Like I need to go do something else to get more into my body.
Yeah, no, from my personal experience, that's the best way to do it. Like, I don't even focus on my breath. I just kind of let the experience do its thing, and then you can kind of reflect on yourself and why you're thinking what you are and why that's important in your head and stuff. Yeah, and unless you've got anything else, Joel, I think this is a decent time to end.
Yeah, that was really nice, man. I appreciate you coming on and giving us your time and spreading your profound wisdom for us today. Appreciate it.
For sure. No, thank you guys for having me. I definitely appreciate it. Questions you asked were good, and it was good. It's a good conversation. So
if people want to find out a bit more about you, where should they go?
Best place to find me is on Instagram at tripsitting.blog. And then I also have a newsletter on Substack that I try to release weekly or like bi-weekly, tripsitting.substack.com. And then obviously the Trip Sitting podcast available on all podcast streaming platforms and YouTube. So be sure to give that a listen.
There we go.
Excellent. Thank you very much, man.
Thanks for listening.